Welcome, everybody, to Decentral Lens. I am so excited today for this show. We have a that's six, special guest, Stephen Miller. Stephen, welcome to the show. My favorite art curator in the space. Every time I have a question about art, a collection, the code behind it, just the artist, anything, Stephen is by far, and he can attest from all the times I text him all the time, day and night about things, that he is the go-to for this. He's my favorite art curator in not only the ordinal space, but ETH and just art in general. So, Stephen, I'm so excited having you in the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Blue. I appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here with you guys today and looking forward to dive into a little bit of art with you. I'm honestly excited to hear more about what you guys are thinking about the market and also what specifically your interests are in art. I know, in large part what you're
Sure.
into, Blue. We've talked code art forever, but Disco, I'm equally as interested in figuring out what it is that, you're into in the space.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be sure to go down that. I've got a bunch of questions, and I love these sort of conversations because we really look at what really is pure and what motivates us. And for me, there's nothing in life that is as powerful as when a piece of art hits you, and whatever format it may be. I spent a handful of years in the music business and that side of things, and like when you would hear a certain song or you'd see it paired with visuals or anything, like the transcendence and kind of the way that it can make you feel part of something greater than yourself. And frankly, for me, a lot of times when I encounter a new piece of art that really hits me, like, it makes me feel very instantly a little bit like, oh my god, I wish I did that. And it's like I got to do more in my life. So it really works from like a inspirational motivation standpoint. We'll go to art museums. Luckily, around the world, we've been to many of them, and they're always like, "Dad, are you going to get a little sad and introspective after we go through this because you're not doing enough?" I'm like, "Most likely, yes." So they figured that out, but it really does. Uh, I just think it's one of the most important things to be celebrated, and it's one of the things that excites me the most about the space, and it's one of the things that just in general I hope maintains its importance and press and just power in the world, and I hope that people continue to celebrate it. So that's why I'm so excited to kind of connect with you on this, because I think that what you're doing is almost a form of advocacy of something that I look at as one of the most extremely important things in our culture. And I hate that it doesn't get kind of the respect and importance on a day-to-day level that I think it deserves. And I know I'm talking art in general, but specifically as I started going down this rabbit hole and looking at this, it's like, how are we going to see like this next movement? What's this next thing going to be? And I always feel that art is kind of the impetus for progression and movements, and that's what really motivates me the most in my kind of pursuit of understanding it. So that's a long-winded answer, but you can tell I'm tightly wound up on this topic, and I'll go as deep as you want, my friend. So welcome.
I appreciate that. And look, to me, finding those that actually have a passion for this, like they're the ones that I want to speak the most with. So the fact that you went long winded, it tells me just as much, how much you care about this stuff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I forgot you two didn't meet down in Nashville, whereas Scribe, Steven, and I were all like attached at the hip at all these different places. And, we'd separate at times, but then as Scribe said, we were always each other's pivot foot. So it was cool. And Disco had a family vacation. He wanted to be down there so bad. But yeah, I guess, Steven, you don't realize like Disco is, I don't want to say way more into art than me, but he's been into in real life art. Me through my mom and through more classical art, but Disco's got a cool collection and he's been into it for years. So we both share that love. So I know he was so, as Disco would say, giddy to have you on the show to ask you tons of questions and just to soak it all in. And the beauty with this show and what we can do visually is, we can scroll around, which we're going to do, later in the show, to really look at things, see what you're looking at, see what you like, see where the future of art is going.
Yeah. Really quickly, side note on that, when you guys were in Nashville, I was in an area that's celebrated for traditional art, and I was going through a moment of just being extremely bored with what I was seeing and the frustration of it. Like it was almost, it was like a little battle within myself. I'm like, dude, I can't see another freaking, landscape, on a wall or this or that. And I'm just so once you kind of, catch the itch of what can be done digitally, looking at traditional, like that's it's a big transition and it's hard to get as excited. And oddly enough, I found myself more drawn to like ceramic pieces and stuff like that with where I was, as
Hmm.
opposed to just that, because it just felt like, oh, that's cool. They can do this. And then when the light hits it this way, it'll look a different way and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of had that. I was like, oh, dude, you guys are in, you're in Nashville doing all that. And I'm sitting here, poking around Santa Fe. And where am I going to find something that represents kind of this next, that urgency and kind of relevance that you see as art progresses?
So let's dive right in. So, Stephen, what got you, like, what was that moment where you were like, this is what I want to do? I want to get into knowing everything about art, being a curator, and such an advocate for artists. Like, what was that spark for you?
So I would actually be lying to you if I said it was a one individual thing, and I'll do my best to keep this less long winded. But the truth of my experience in art here has stemmed from what has been a longer career within the tech space. So I originally came into crypto full time back in January of 2021, when I was asked to be the COO for a crypto education onboarding company called Cryptocurrent, and had a lot of privilege through that to be able to go and interview a lot of great names. But there was one specific event that kind of kicked things over to a degree, and that was getting the chance to go to the very first Art Blocks weekend out in Marfa at the Art Blocks house. And I got the opportunity to sit down with Eric Calderon, aka Snowfro, basically on the dock of this old mill where we just sat and talked about art for like an hour and a half, and just
Nice.
the significance of why it made sense for them to put this, basically this massive installation in a small desert town smack in the middle of nowhere, Texas,
Yeah.
um, and really chopping it up and figuring out, okay, like why is this just so important? And it made a ton of sense in that moment. And from there forward, like I started to really realize just how important art on chain is. But when we got around like January 2023, and unfortunately things shuttered over at cryptocurrent, I was left in this place where I was trying to figure out what, like, how is it that I want to stay in this ecosystem? What do I want to do in Web3 that can make a difference? And it came back to that exact sentiment. It's like, what can I do that is most purposeful out here? It took me like 6 months. I messed around within ENS for the prior like year or so and trying to make a difference for that community, but it didn't feel like that difference was being made on a personal level.
Right.
I got into the summertime around April, May of that year, and very quickly came to the conclusion that as I look back at my own past, my mother was a suppressed artist. Her father never supported her in her art practice. And when he finally passed, she allowed herself to actually become an artist and, open up her own art practice. But from her experience, she struggled tremendously with gaining that exposure and communicating what it is that her art was and the story, and finding different outlets to new collectors. So I took that lesson, and then at the same time, what I learned from my time with Snowfro, and kind of came to this epiphany that this is where I belong. I've worked in branding forever. I've worked in comms forever, and I can help make that difference for artists. So that's when I officially stepped in and started, a handful of different art discovery threads, help people connect with different art that they enjoy. And it's since led me to where I am now, which is in a place where I get to curate exhibitions. I do a weekly newsletter that's specifically focused on upcoming collections and releases. And I even have a new show that I've been hosting on Tuesdays called Color Commentary, where we sit down with folks from all walks of life in the art ecosystem. So it's been a hell of a journey to get to here, but I love what I do.
Yeah. And just for those listeners, color commentary is, I always joke to Disco and Steven, everyone I know, that I can listen to spaces for maybe 3 minutes, and so many of them are so pumpy and cringy. Steven's color commentary is, and I find artist spaces often lacking. The questions that you ask on color commentary, Stephen, really whenever you're talking with artists on, I know you're on so many different spaces, the the questions you ask them and then the context that you give to not only help artists but to understand their art better is second to none in my opinion. And whenever I hear you on, it's like a good, it's good radio, it's a good show, and I always learn something. So we appreciate you and what you do for this space and what you do for the artists.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the way that I've conducted that show has been different, almost by design, but it was a big practice of mine as I got into podcasting back in 2017 or 2018, of just like studying and trying to figure out, what it is that makes a really good show. And I'm sure that you both have your own examples of different hosts and different programs that you think have made for great programming and made for great interviews. And you start to shape your own model off of that. Right. And I imagine that you guys could probably cite off two or three different examples right off the top. But to me, it's like, how can we tell the story in a compelling way and not get too lost in the sauce? Right. Because ultimately, you have to understand your audience is so many different types of people. You need to figure out what it is that can land for the vast majority of them at any given moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Like the one North Star Disco and I've always used for this show, whether it's ratings friendly or not, is actually, is this interesting to us? Does this pique our curiosity? And is this something we want to pursue learning more about? And that's kind of the barometer. That's it. It's
Yeah.
super blood simple. I want to ask you about your mom, because my mom was an art history major and I loved her very much. And I learned a ton from her. Do you think the suppression that you saw your mom feel before she branched out on her own and finally just spread her wings and did art, is that the impetus why you're so good with artists and so empowering of them?
I'm not sure that it's so much the impetus, but it's definitely a connective tissue layer because it's a story that I've heard all too often. There are no shortage of individuals in this world whose parents just say, "Well, you're not going to make any money at that. Why would you ever bother?" Or I'm not going to support you in a career path that's going to ultimately lead you to be on the street. And that's super unfortunate because not every two minds think the same. Some are way more creative than others, and that is the artist's, journey. So for what my mother went through and what many other artists have gone through in the past with suppression of an artistic drive is something that should not be suppressed. And I think in a lot of cases today, it's starting to move away from that. But we need, for especially parents, to support that from a really young age, especially if you want to bring about the next wave of truly incredible artists in our world.
Yeah, because what does that do sociologically to an individual who has this desire to express and has something within them? Because you can't necessarily, I maintain, like, you can't necessarily teach the desire to be expressive and to have your own voice, right? Like, you can go to classes and learn things or whatever, but it's truly, authentic to those individuals. So the suppression of that has such a potential negative impact to the rest of the development for somebody in the course of their life. It's like, you got, if you have that in you, you can't fake it, like it's in you, and then to be told almost like, hey, that's wrong, don't water that garden. It's like, think of that, just carrying that around, that kind of, almost having to shut down something that is uber, passionate within your bloodstream, right? And within your mind. So it's a really powerful thing. I find it fascinating that you had some inspiration in Marfa. That's such an interesting place in and of itself. So for you to kind of, get impacted there and have it all kind of, flip a switch is a lot for me to think about. So I appreciate the story.
Yeah, the entirety of that Marfa experience was something else entirely. To realize that it was such a pivotal part of my journey into art out here is hysterical. Just because to me, I'm sitting here thinking like, people of my tribe wandered for 40 years in the desert to find their way to Israel. But at the same time, for me, I wandered through the desert in a rental car for 3 hours to find my passion for art.
Yeah.
In a
And is
Malibu mid-sized sedan.
Oh
Yeah, but
man.
But and I think it's so fascinating. And I don't mean to go tangential, but I do think that it's very interesting that there are certain areas that really kind of inspire and tap into creativity. And I just think those places should really be celebrated, and as many people as can, kind of pilgrim down to these different areas. Like there's just some places have just a different jolt that just hits you in a certain way that does lead to that inspiration. And I think those places should really be celebrated and kind of outlined a little bit more in our culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this a couple days ago. Duresh did a great tweet and he just said, how many of you were supported by your parents doing art? So, to Steven's point, it was just a nonstop litany of, there was definitely some yeses, but there was a lot more no's. And it wasn't like no or else, but it's just the subtle peer pressure of like, we're an upper middle class family. Like you should be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. Like, and then I started thinking about myself. Like I wanted to go to university to do film, and my dad was like, you should probably get your Bachelor of Science. He was an engineer. I was really good at math, so it made sense that I did it. So I fulfilled his wish. I was a physics major, switched to geology, but then once college was over, then I started doing comedy. I started making my bucket list of the things I wanted to do. And I'm not trying to make this about me as much as like artists, no matter what you even consider art, not just, paint on canvas. So many were kind of told not to do that thing. And it breaks my heart that your mom had to wait for her dad to pass before she felt like she could freely do it. Cause I'm sure at the end of the day, like deep down, he'd be proud of her, So just wanted to bring that point up.
Yeah, no, and it's a perfectly valid point. To take it back around for just 2 seconds, like the idea of that suppression, to me, I've started to almost equate it to the parents that, for whatever reason, they force their kids when after they've shown an indication that they want to like write with their left hand, forcing them to learn how to write with their right hand, and basically going off of that idea, like if you're going to force somebody so far out of what their calling is, you're going to ultimately create more problems down the line in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So to me, I would rather see a world where we can encourage that creativity and nurture it and cultivate it, well into the future. And that's a big reason why I've advocated the way that I have, because I want to see more people commit to on-chain art and commit to showcasing their creativity in a global sense more so than a regional. For the longest time, like especially in art history sense, like a lot of art was just regional and it never found a way around the world. Right now we're at a period of time where like straight away, because of what the internet and the blockchain has enabled, it's made for global art. It's made for the biggest potential digital art renaissance that we've ever experienced, or the biggest art renaissance in general that we could experience. So
Yeah.
I'm super encouraged by it, and I think there's a ton of potential for it. There's more encouragement of it now than ever.
And are you seeing that manifest in different areas being very, kind of leading the charge? Like there's certain kind of, I don't want to say hotbeds, but areas where a lot of stuff is percolating from that perspective and then it kind of feeds upon itself. And if so, where are some of those kind of markets or spots in the world that you're seeing a lot of this kind of bubble up from a creative perspective?
So, I mean, there's definitely a very significant art community within Miami and within LA and New York. I would also make a case for Chicago, just like the specific cities in the US.
Mhm.
Nashville is starting to populate, which I'm really encouraged by,
Hmm.
because I think that's a really incredible city, as we got the chance to experience during Bitcoin 2024.
Right.
But I want to see more of those artists take an interest in all of the potential that you can find out of the digital landscape. And fortunately, especially in cities like New York and Miami, you have a lot of artists out there that are advocating actively. But you also have institutions around the world that have started to adopt and form their own digital art committees, right? The Whitney just the other day announced the latest addition to their digital art committee in La Barbaroja, aka Redbeard. Really, really love his perspective as a collector, and the fact that the Whitney of all institutions is prioritizing digital art in that way. and finding people that are native to our ecosystem to go and be a voice on that committee is a huge encouraging sign. So I'm very, very much so looking forward to what we have coming up in the next year or so. I'm not necessarily focused on like the very short term. I think that we have a very bright future ahead in that regard.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people forget is like there's all the day-to-day degenning of buying art. Obviously, so much of it is tied up in PFPs and meme coins and stuff like that, but the fundamental, there is so many good artists. You introduced us to, I might pronounce it wrong, Ika in Nashville. Her stuff, her three-dimensional like real world AR stuff is just absolutely beautiful. But there's so many to name, but getting past all the degen stuff and all the politics and who knows who and who can pump stuff the most, like do you think in 20, 30 years when this era will be looked at and probably even given a name like cubism or pointillism or whatever, that what rises to the top won't even be the things that get the most attention now?
So I don't mean to get too lost in the question, but I think that if there's one thing that I will hypothesize of where this entire movement is headed, it's going to have to be less known for like the aesthetic side of things. Because with what you brought up in cubism, that's an aesthetic. It's a style within art. Just as Disco, you had brought up earlier the fascination with sculpture. Sculpture, there's plenty of different styles. It's not necessarily a larger movement. It's simply what has become a style and something that's known. With this digital art movement, and it's more specifically the tokenized art movement, I think we're going to start to see it defined almost as if there was how the Renaissance had like the high Renaissance period, the early Renaissance, and then even the post Renaissance phase. I think that's what we're more likely to see in the future when the art historians are defining this moment. But I'm not exactly sure if that answered your question. To be fair,
No, it did. You're saying it's more of a time
Era.
period and an era of creativity. Disco, it's funny, like the whole beginning of this show was about X being censored in Brazil and just censorship in general, and how the more censorship we have, the less freedom of thought we have, the less ideas we can have come in, and probably arguably over time, the less art thrives and blooms and springs in every which way. So I think this conversation could be more important on so many
Yeah.
fronts.
And I look at it, and not to make it about me, but really quickly I will. One of the things that
It's
that
okay to
hit me
talk
the
about
most
yourself.
and really resonated with me was street art, and kind of, when I first understood, kind of the subculture and, kind of hip hop into graffiti and, how all that kind of came, and then seeing that get not necessarily normalized, but kind of commoditized to a degree from, oh, now this is, oh, everybody likes this, and it's like kind of accepted. And there was something that was so visceral and vital about, tagging a freaking, subway car, and then, tagging empty walls and creating something out of nothing and all that. And I just look at the whole element of blockchain and this whole canvas that we have the time right now. And I know, Blue, you've used the analogy of the cave, with ordinals and everything like that. Like, we have time to create and etch things on the next realm, and it's just so fascinating. I love kind of, I want to see the kind of that ethos of kind of punk rock and graffiti and street art and all that kind of penetrate and transform into what we can see with, digital art and kind of the tokenized art movement. So my one question I've always had that I wanted to get into is, do you think that it's kind of a waste of time or not for people that have experienced and come up with art in the other formats to transition into this space? Or do you think it should just be, we should focus more on, the ones that are incubating natively in this new forum?
so it's a really good question. And I would probably venture to say that the number of artists that are explicitly digital natives is way fewer than
I
you would
know.
ever imagine. And that's mostly because you can't necessarily sustain off of exclusively being in the tokenized art scene. There's a lot of different artists who are great examples of that in terms of how they've found a way to counterbalance it. I would make the case that traditional artists almost have a duty to themselves to experiment in this ecosystem and see if this is another path for them to sustain their careers and grow their community of collectors. I think one of the most beautiful things about tokenized art, especially here in Web3, is that you have a lot more, not necessarily control, but a lot more outlets to connect with your
Yeah.
collectors than any traditional artist would ever have. Because what are you going to really do within the traditional art world to maintain a relationship with your collectors? You're going to manage a mailing list. Just for the record, my dog completely agrees with me. That's why he's barking in the other room.
Here,
I
here.
kicked my dog out right before the show started, so can confirm.
Relate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the point that we were driving to though is that like I think with trad art and you look at everything that has kind of come full circle within the tokenized art scene, because a lot of these tokenized artists have actually fallen off or they've gone into, a hibernation of sorts. They have to go back to the traditional landscape and figure out different ways that they can monetize for themselves and to have revenue so they can be an artist for the long term, as opposed to remaining a starving artist when the market goes bearish over here, right? The reality of art is that it does not actually find itself bound to, traditional economic structures. Like if the market goes bearish or we go into a recession, those things don't matter. Artists still create, right? They're
Right.
still influenced by culture. They're still, putting their creativity to use around their existing environment, how that recession period might make them feel. So I think that it's necessary for them to live in both worlds. Will there be a time where tokenized art can actually stand on its own feet and will exclusively have tokenized artists? Yes. I firmly believe that we're headed there. But I think for right now, you have to be willing to look at both sides of the spectrum still.
Well, and you got to remember too, artists are getting like there's big artists, and I won't name who they are, but they've experimented on ETH or maybe Bitcoin and on chain. And some of these guys with big followings, because of all the negativity you see about the environment and Bitcoin mining, have actually seen a nasty backlash from their own collectors. So they're almost being muzzled a little to experiment less with it. So, the smaller person, obviously, who doesn't have a big following yet or really has nothing to lose, probably has more incentive to try it. But some of these big folks are a little gun shy because of this.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that more often than not, we're starting to see people be willing to be a maverick, right? Be willing to go against the grain. Unfortunately, it takes courage to do that. And it's not like the vast majority of artists are known for extroversion or known for being willing to step out of that comfort zone. And I think that as time goes on, we start to see more and more examples of how it does work. I think that's when we're going to start to see more people being willing to step out.
Would you say that part of the, looking at the tokenized art movement, that whole side of it, one of the things that I find so interesting and potentially rewarding, but also like something that maybe someone like you could help with is then you do have more of a two-way communication with your holders, right? So you are not necessarily responsible to them, but you do have the ability, which is great if you look at it from being able to cut out kind of the middlemen in a way to have this kind of back and forth with your holders and directly be able to say, hey, I'm going to do this, or what about this, and have that communication. But I think that that's just a, an aspect of this that is really exciting and interesting and hasn't really existed as much as before. It's like you can have direct conversations, you can host da da da, you can provide X, Y, or Z, as opposed to just being a, maybe an opening or two where you invite a list.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to what you had said about like your general interest within street art and how that movement was something that you connected with.
Right.
Blue loves code art, and I'm sure that like there's a number of other styles, whether it's like architecturally based or structural based, from some of the other things that he shared with me. There is an aesthetic for every single collector out there. It doesn't necessarily matter what your preferences are. You can find it in tokenized art. It exists. You can literally go out and seek them out if you're so willing to do so. But when you consider that from a collector side of things, it makes a ton of sense because you are opening the door to an entire world, literally, of artists across the world who are
Yeah.
willing to showcase their work here for the very first time. Blue brought up Ecolestienne earlier on in the show, and she's based out of France. And I would have never ever been familiarized with her work were it not for, you know, big players like Gamma, who really give a shit about the artists within their partner program, right? You have so many other examples like that because I'm on the opposite side of the world from them, right? And this is her work, her Spirals collection, and it's phenomenal work. And you have to dive a lot deeper into it to understand what exactly she is doing to create these things and how it actually is brought forward within AR. But you don't get the chance to experience something like this unless you're willing to branch out. I would say the same thing of another graffiti artist who came to mind, which is Zilla. And Zilla, he's done releases on Gamma. He's done a release with Counterfeit. And I know that he's also, I believe in the past, done some art over on Ethereum too. But there's no shortage of really, really incredible artists of entirely different backgrounds, entirely different aesthetics.
Yeah.
And it's just worth exploring.
And that's the fun, like the exploration that, you go and daisy chain your way down. That's what's so remarkable. And one thing that I've always been waiting for is kind of, you know, where things are going to go in terms of being able to kind of share your own personal collection. And I think that when we really get to that point and people can go to, oh, I'm following Blue, let me go check out, his collection and have like a dope experience with that. That's what I'm kind of salivating for, that kind of next step on or next phase of that evolution.
Well, disco, I can tell you right now because I talk about it on damn near every show I'm on. It's just about here. We have a couple of really big players out there that are really making a massive step forward in terms of how art and tokenized art is displayed. You've seen experiments from the likes of Bright Moments, who did a ton of phenomenal IRL exhibitions through the last couple of years. They just rolled out a brand new platform called View Art, View.art, and it's good. It's a nice iteration, but I got to tell you, I am absolutely over the moon with what I've seen from White Walls. The White Walls app and what they're doing is the right approach to expanding how we can showcase and share our own artwork in our homes, in other our friends' homes. It's incredible what they've done, and it's only going to get better from here. It's just as simple as like connecting your wallets via like a handshake, basically, not even having to sign to your White Walls account, and then you can connect your phone directly to your TV and cast it directly, and it's direct from the chain.
Outstanding. I've been waiting for that so hard. Like it's just awesome. Cool. I will be all over that.
Yeah, Disco's thing has always been like, I collect the art and it's just like we all have it just buried in our wallets, or in my case, I have like 38 different wallets. I'm like, where is that one? I can't find it. Did that sell? Where is it? And you want to show it together. I bought something back probably 7 or 8 years ago that was great. It's more manual upload of your digital art, but it's called Mural. And they were one of the first ones to do a really nice matted frame and screen. I actually have it right in the other side of my monitor here. And I put a lot of my art up there. And I think that's a great way to showcase it in your house. But like Steven said, and Disco, like you want to be able to connect all the dots and have people see your art and hopefully even be able to like share and talk to them with it. I think we all expected that virtual reality would be much further here and we'd all be in some like virtual cool place with a pool table in the middle and bar stools where we're talking about it as we're spinning around looking at all of Steven's art, a lot of Disco's art, a lot of my art, and having cool tunes piping in the background. But it's just whether it's because Meta owns Oculus and we all don't trust them at all for our information and to scan our eyeballs, like it's not here yet to the point where we can all just like virtually hang is a big group. We're still on our flat 2D monitors, so it's not there yet. But I can't wait to look at White Wall's app, and I'll check out Bright Moments too. But yeah, that needs to break through because we need better ways to look at this and talk about it with each other than a flat screen.
Yeah, the thing that just is, it's getting to be way clearer to me now, and this goes back to I think it was actually August, September of last year. So it's funny sitting here saying that I've been saying this for a year, but the want and the desire within the art community to be able to go to a house party and go in and hang out with your friends and immediately say, I just collected this incredible piece from Die with the Most Likes, really want to share it with you, and immediately just tap on your phone and cast it directly to the nearest screen. Like that's where we should be like headed towards.
Amen.
VR, as much as I want to believe in VR, especially like with what we've seen out of the Apple headset that nobody talks about anymore because it's too damn expensive, we need more software based solutions than we need hardware solutions, because software is what's ultimately going to be more not acceptable, more accessible by
Yeah.
most.
Yeah, for sure. So, Stephen, a really smart person, told me a good way to kind of look at art and questions to ask. It's what I like to call the 212 model, or the New York area code model. And I'd like to ask you my first question, Stephen, which is, what are two things happening in Bitcoin right now in art that you are just fired up about?
So two things under one banner is how I'll give you this one. The big thing that I think we've needed a lot more of across art has been a challenge to the way that we've had mechanisms for minting and the experience of collecting art. And that has started to see some iteration across the last couple of months, more than normal. But right now, there's two different concepts, and this is where I'll give you my first two that are directly attached to this sentiment. The first of which is called swarming, and it's a concept that both Harto and Far have debuted with a recent collection they released called Brutal Edge. And the entire premise of it is giving people a new way of transforming not only the art that they collect that they love into and redeeming for more exclusive artwork from said artists. And there are no shortage of ways that this can be and is going to be utilized, but it's a way for you to gain access by supporting those artists in a way that really does pay it down the line. So I'm a huge fan of what they've got coming from that. It's a really balanced approach to expanding creative collections. And you don't see that, on every single chain. It's just not there. The other side of it, and this is the second piece that I'm really, really looking forward to, and you can actually go participate with it right now if you do so choose, is a collection that's debuting over on Gamma from the team at Art Packs. And what this is it's called, like, the collection itself is called Bit Lords. And what it is you think back on like your trading card collecting experience, depending on what era you're from. Like if you were collecting baseball cards in the late 80s, early 90s in the junk wax era, like the idea of cracking a pack and seeing what players you were able to collect. If you talk about the more modern era, if you were a kid of the 90s or a kid in the early 2000s collecting Pokemon cards, you loved ripping open packs. You loved seeing the rare cards and the holo foils and everything else that you got out of it. But we now have an experience here in the Bitcoin art scene where people can have that experience. And it's almost an evolution on what we saw at the very early start of the last NFT bull market with NBA Top Shot. And I'm a huge fan of finding new adaptations and new ways of utilizing these types of mechanisms. And what Art Packs is doing with Bitlords, being their Genesis Collectors edition, is they're bringing out a brand new generative algorithm from their creator, which is Shane Richardson. And he's allowed for each of these packs to have 8 pieces from the collection in it. So you get, I think it was four of the commons. You get two that are uncommons, one rare, and then one final piece that can either be like mythic, legendary, or some other higher degree of rarity. And to me, that is a different experience. It may not be the right end experience, but it's something new. It's something that people can actually have an experience collecting art with, and they can trade upon them. They can even leave these packs unopened if they want to, just the same way that we had in the collector landscape. So I'm really bullish on those two new mechanisms. but at large, I want to see more experimentation. Those are two of the things that I'm really, really excited about.
That's interesting. So what would you call these, like the pack system? Because I'm on Gamma right now. I don't see Bitlords. Has this not been released yet?
So I believe it's right on the Gamma homepage, actually. If you go to gamma.io and you scroll across
Oh,
the
okay.
midsection, it is the fourth one over. So Bitlords packs right there.
Yeah. I didn't separate Bit and Lords. You'd think they would have figured that out. Cool. So,
Yeah.
all
If you just
right.
click view collection there you go.
And how many? Oh, so this is actually minting as we speak.
Yep. There are 512 pieces in the collection. And then once you have those packs on hand, you go over to the Art Packs website and they have a pack break mechanism over there where it'll literally give you a pack opening experience on the site.
The reveal.
Yeah, and that is fun. Like, when you go back to the ETH days, you had the Izuki reveal, the Renga reveal. Those days are fun, but you're saying the cool thing here is it's not just revealing and cracking open one, it's cracking open a pack of 8. So there are 512 packs, correct? Not pieces of art. So there's actually about 4,000 and what's 12, so 4,096 actual pieces of art, correct?
I believe that math checks out. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it checks out.
I was going to say I'm terrible about that sort of thing. So the fact that you can run that math off the top of your head, I appreciate that.
He has an abacus handy.
Yeah, 12 times 8 is 96. So I knew it didn't cross the 1, so I didn't have to add the 1 to that last column. So I think it's 40.
Oh, new math.
4096. Now these are super cool. So Bitlords packs, does the number matter, or the like are there any other things about rarity, or is it just what we've kind of come to know about rarity?
So the way that I've understood Bitlords so far is that the pack number itself doesn't make as much of a difference. It's more just about understanding that this is almost a ticket. It's your opportunity to go and open the pack. But whenever you do open it, you'll find that within those outputs, it does break down appropriately to 4 commons, 2 uncommons, 1 rare. And then ultimately, the thing that I think a lot of people are going to really prioritize is that final piece. It'll either be epic, which you'll have 50% odds on, legendary, which will have 25% odds, exotic at 12.5, and or mythic at 12.5. The cool thing to me about this is like a lot of people are going to have an opportunity to chase here. And a lot of people in collectibles also understand this concept of what a chase is. It's the
Yeah.
idea that there's always something that you are chasing after that's like the most desirable piece in the collection. And with this specifically being the Genesis collection for art packs, you have these gold pieces. I think it's something like 20 of them are mixed in, or something really small is mixed in.
Okay.
And if you manage to collect one of these, you're automatically going to be allow listed for every single art packs drop that comes out subsequently. So if Disco decided he wanted to go and release generative art collection over here and had an allow list for his collectors, if you had that gold one, you're automatically going to get access to Disco's drop.
Nice.
So that is the Willy Wonka golden wrapper, or the gold, if you will, is the Hardo Sat guaranteed kind of first look cheaper mint or free mint on the new collection for all of Shane Richardson's work.
So yes, for all of Shane Richardson's work, but also for every single release that comes out on our packs.
Okay, so art packs, this is just the beginning of art packs. So I noticed these are very origami looking. They're quite beautiful, and the art, the color palette is really really cool.
It's
Anything?
actually it's actually based off of Rorschach ink blots of all things. It's really fascinating to me that he's managed to create these structures and almost have added like a colorized
Wow.
form to the classic Rorschach test.
I don't know about you, Disco, but I'm getting more FOMO by the
I know there's
second.
going to be there's going to be less than 512 available shortly. So I'm supposed to
Yeah.
stay focused. I'm trying to stay laser focused, locked in, but I think that
Yeah.
512 will dwindle.
Well, this is great. So basically, we've got these packs um, from Bitlords. This is amazing, and then we've got swarming, which I did not know that phrase, but I know you had sent me what Hardo and what Far were doing with Brutal Edge. It's such a cool concept, and things are evolving so quickly. Um, who would you say right now is your most like I'm sure that you probably have 1,000 of these, but who is the most underrated artist that you know of right now, or you just want to scream from the high hills like, how can you not see him or her?
So you're absolutely right. There's like thousands that I could probably go to right now, and they all deserve their due. But the one that I've continued to go back to so much so that I've actually recently helped her with a deck to try and close out the collection that she has that's currently still available, is Postwook. And Postwook is known. She's actually very established. She's been around the scene for years and years now. Has a great following. Has a tremendous portfolio of work. But she has this new collection on Bitcoin, which is her first true standalone collection that she released over there called The Astronomer's Daughter. And it's such a thoughtful collection from start to finish. It I'm convinced that it has to be the most underrated piece out there at the moment. And while that may not necessarily translate to she's the most underrated artist, it is definitely the most underrated collection from where I sit at the moment. It's just got a beautiful story behind it. It's deeply tied to her relationship with her father
Oh,
and his history working as a NASA engineer for a number of years. But each of these pieces bring in landscape photography that she's taken over the years, and even paintings that she's done of certain landscapes, and managed to bring them directly tied to specific sat dates that she was able to curate based on certain astronomical events. So there's so much to the collection, and there's so much variance. There's a lot of beautiful locations in it, as you can see in the deck that's on screen. Like, you have the Dolomites, you have Sedona, Arizona, which is one that's very near and dear to my heart. You have locations like Pentland Hills in the UK. So it's a global collection, and there's something for everybody in here. But the reason why I'm as bullish on it as I am is when you have these deeper layers of connection where an individual can find resonance with an artwork, whether that's from the motif and the aesthetic or just from the meaning, because so many of these are dated works, right? You have on screen right now those pieces from New Zealand. It's March 1st, 2011 and March 5th, 2012. People have a lot of attachment to dates. One of the pieces that I collected from the collection was my wedding anniversary. And I adore it because I'm from Arizona, and it's literally Sedona. It's Cathedral Rock, and I'm obsessed with it. I love it. But there's a lot of other people that have found their own attachments to these dates, whether it's a celestial event or it's something specifically like, when they got into Bitcoin. There's a lot of reason why people will find attachment to this, but once this thing is gone and each of these pieces has been collected, it gives a collector a lot more reason to hold it. And frankly, I think they're going to be dedicated holders of Postworks long into the future.
that's an insanely great point. Like, I'm not going to say too much, but I noticed like one of my kids' birthdays just popped by and the place lined up. So it's like, yeah, like let's I'm gonna see if I can't secure that afterwards because that's a complete making that extra line of connection. And I think it's just a different element of stickiness and kind of loyalty to what you're doing. And as a collector, those are the things that really resonate and make things become more less emotional and or even emotional and just kind of a no-brainer. It's like, well, dude, I got to get it because of that. And having a story behind kind of your justification to collect is really important.
Beyond that too, though, there's another really important point that I want to make that people don't think about as much in the tokenized scene as they do in the traditional sense.
Hmm.
But you really should, if you're going to collect, whether it's this specific work or if it's the work of a different artist, you should take the time to really get to know the artist and have a like try to form a relationship with them, just as you would with any other peer that you have in the space. Because understanding their story and their background, it gives you further reason to want to collect or to not want to collect. So I would make that encouragement that like if this is the sort of collection that speaks to you and you find a resonance here, I would say that you should reach out to Postbook, talk to her about it, get to know the collection from her viewpoint, and share your story. And then at that point, collect. But there's a lot of different reasons why this is a phenomenal work that has, in my opinion, a place in anybody's collection.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I can confirm she's awesome. So Steven turned me on to Postworks work a while ago. We have been talking about it a while, but just recently she and I were chatting because I do love this collection. And Steven actually put this together for her for the pieces I believe that are still available, right, Steven? But they're just absolutely they're pretty breathtaking with all the rich, vibrant colors, the different locations. Like I have these two, what do you call them? Like the skinny, like castle window openings. Like I just bought them at like a little art fair 10 years ago and they're on my wall. And I'm like, oh, I could almost cut these out, like print them nicely, cut them out so it looks like they're coming through a window through that. So it's beautiful landscape. And, like you said, there's so many places like Sedona. We just went last year with the family and that place is spiritual and breathtaking beyond belief. But like you said, it's either dates or the sign, the colors and the signs like Cancer white, Sexton's pink, Capricorn green. It's just so cool the amount of depth that she goes into. So this is like a big advertisement for Postbook, but it's well deserved. She's such an awesome person, and this is such a great example of why we're in this space, what makes it so awesome. So beyond all the degen stuff, beyond all the
PFPs.
alpha and PFPs and pumps, like the art, you got to figure in 20 years, sure, there'll be a PFP collection, maybe the Bitcoin shrooms or one of those might stand the test of time. But because that is a part of the social culture and the anthropological look back at this era. But the art, like some of this art, is going to be timeless. And yeah, I agree with you, Stephen. This is beautiful, and I've got my top 5 already in a folder. And now that I'm looking at these again, I'm like, I might have to add like 3 more and then do a stress test on those. But yeah, these are absolutely beautiful.
And just to make sure that everybody in your audience is aware of it, um, there was no compensation for me to do this. I'm just a huge freaking fan of this collection. Like I really do think that she has something extremely special on her hands there. Um, it's the only reason I speak to it as passionately as I typically do, because there's so much detail to it, and it really is a special. It's like it's a portal to a different time. It's a portal to a different world that may be special to you. So I'm always here for that sort of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. As are we. So this has been so enlightening. Um, so I got to ask you, like, we've talked about like what's happening like on the tech side and kind of the cool concepts people are doing and coming up with. We've talked about one underrated artist. I'm sure you'd love to name like honorable mention for 712 more because there's so much good stuff out there. But what upcoming collections um, that maybe people haven't heard about, or maybe because the market's down, a lot of people have obviously gone dormant right now. What up and coming collections, maybe 2, should be on everybody's radar?
So this is always really difficult for me because, like you just said, on the underrated artist side of things, there are probably 712 that I could talk to. But with upcoming releases and curating the All Eyes on Art digest that I drop every week, I'm looking and sharing what's coming up in the next 30 days. But typically speaking, I'm going a lot further out than that for my own records, and so that I can track appropriately. For me, this if you're looking more like in the immediate term, I think that The Swarm by Yoshi Sodioka is going to be a really special collection. Had the opportunity to speak with Lonely Boy, who's the lead curator on that collection from Verse Solos last night on my show. And getting to understand the story behind this piece is just, it's a remarkable a remarkable showing of not just like the data that this artist studied to create and generate this collection, but the amount of attachment to his own personal life that he was able to build into that data is really rare. And as you look at the work, if you do go and take the time to look at it, you'll find yourself wondering where that little like gray area, that line is drawn between, is this real or is this a simulation? And I think because he put so much of his own personal story into it, that line is tremendously blurred. So for R equals 0, which is the first part of the Swarm collection, it's literally available via 48-hour ranked auction right now.
Where?
Yeah,
While you're talking, where do I go?
that's over on Verse Solos. So you go to verse.works and it should be right there on the homepage. But everything that you see in this collection is generative. It's completely generated. That's the exhibition of it. They did a full IRL exhibition in East London, showcasing this work on these massive LED panels. It's unreal to see it. And it all is studying like flight patterns of birds using this really complex set of algorithms known as Boyd algorithms. It's fascinating to me to see how they do it, but you see them moving between the IRL form and then the digital form all in one piece to show the fact that like this isn't real. None of the stuff that you're seeing right now is actually real video. It's not rotoscoped or anything. So it's really cool to be able to see how he went about that and how ultimately it all culminates together as one piece. Is another piece or another part of this collection called 1.618 that's a lot more personally curated and doesn't involve a good bit of like IRL photography and videography and rotoscoping. It's coming out later on, but I'm a huge fan of what he's done with this collection. I think it's really incredible work.
Is verse.works where we can mint this?
Yeah, so like I had said, it's a 48-hour ranked auction. That means that you'll be able to go and place a bid, and you'll track that bid over on VerseWorks for the next 48 hours. So you'll click right there where your mouse is,
Right here.
uh, and that'll take you to the mint pass. Once that 48-hour auction is done and the remaining 8 pieces have been collected, you'll have the opportunity to go and redeem that pass for the piece that is in the collection. And again, these are all one of 16, so they're all unique from one another. It's not like you're just buying an edition.
So this is
So
8 artworks, all presented by Solos. So right now, with 1 day left, the lowest bid is $201. So it's kind of like that was a Dutch auction, but the top bids will win, and everyone else will be priced out.
yes, but it will rebate to the lowest winning price. So while you see right there that like there's like what is that top bid right now? It's 2,000 some odd dollars.
$2,025 is top.
Yeah.
201 is the current low.
Yep. So when it officially closes after 48 hours, the final price that will be settled upon for all of those top bidders will be that 8th position price. So
And
you will
this-
only end up 201 in this case if it stays where it is.
So
Got
they're
it.
almost like placeholding it, right?
Yes.
What do you mean placeholding it?
You put in a high bid because you want to make sure that you get it, but you understand that the lower bid's going to be what you're going to actually end up paying.
Oh, got it. So basically, Ray Mint or whatever is basically saying like,
Wants it.
I'm in. Give
Yeah.
me. So this is on Ethereum. This is all on chain, Steven?
So as I understand it, it's on chain, but I would not be surprised if part of it had to be off chain. The amount of data richness that goes into something like this, like it's really hard to put something that's that data rich and that dependent on extremely high resolution animated video. It's hard as hell to put something like that on chain. So I imagine that at the very least, a big part of it is on chain. But to me, this is one of those collections that could very easily go down as like one of this specific artist's like opuses. So I'm a very big fan of this one. The other ones that I'm going to give you one bonus one in the middle here, but it's only because it's going to a really, really great cause.
Okay.
The next one is actually an auction that's being put on through AOTM Art of This Millennium in partnership with Iconic Moments. It is an auction of 3 Chromie squiggles that are directly from Eric Calderon's personal collection. And all of the funds from it are going to be going directly to the Museum of Art and Light that's opening later on this year in Kansas City. Or, sorry, technically it's just north of Kansas City, but that's not really relevant here. The point is that through this auction, which currently has a reserve price for each of these pieces at 3.5 ETH,
Or
you will
should I
get
be going right now just so I can look and listen at the same time?
this is over on AOTM. I will grab the link for you real quick and I'll drop it in chat.
AOTM. Let's see if I get lucky here. We empower AOTM.gallery. Sure, it'll be right up top. So this is Chromie Squiggles. Okay.
Trying to find the actual link for you. But at any rate, while you're searching for it, the reserve price on each of the pieces is 3.5 ETH, which is roughly the current floor of Chromie Squiggles. And the big benefit out of this is that each of these pieces will go home with individual buyers once the auction does close. And I believe it's a 7-day auction. And in addition to the actual piece, you're going to get a 24 by 24 reproduction of the piece by Matter Labs, which is a phenomenal print shop. Like, they do incredible reproductions of on-chain works. And just getting the chance to see some of these up close, like the detail on them is nuts. Like, it's something you need to see. So I'm a really big fan of Snow Froze, and that's been well documented over the years by how I never shut up about him. But to me, in terms of on-chain artwork, especially in the generative movement, like, it's a staple. It's one of the most blue chip and recognized collections across all of digital and tokenized art. So I see this as a huge opportunity for collectors that really do connect on that level. But the very last piece that I'll give you that I think is worth having,
double bonus, double encore.
well, that was actually
That's
the bonus,
training.
because I consider that a collection that's already out here, but it's an opportunity to collect.
Okay.
The last one just got announced, and I'm really amped up about it. You and I have already talked plenty about Vivid Gallery and how, frankly, nobody is handling generative art the way that they have over on Bitcoin. I'm really impressed with the way that Gerard has run that entire operation. But they introduced a brand new collecting mechanism that I'm going to butcher the pronunciation on for the umpteenth time. But the mechanism itself is called Chef d'oeuvre. And it introduces this idea that instead of collecting an output from a generative algorithm, what you're doing is you're collecting the entire algorithm. So the brand new collection that they're debuting is called Eternal Tides, and it's from an artist who goes by Phenomena. They had 2 different collections that debuted during the last cycle over on Art Blocks, and their work is incredible. It's hyper realistic, but it also is very, I would argue, surrealist. But I'm a very big fan of what they've created over time, and I think that Vivid and their new direction with this mechanism sets a really interesting new precedent. So I suspect it's going to be available via an auction. It'll probably be a reserve auction that ends up getting run through Magic Eden, but it's really meant to be an exploration of the ocean shifting moods. So there's, of all of the outputs that you're going to be able to see from this algorithm that you're purchasing, there's going to be, a lot of this sentiment of like mirroring how unpredictable nature is. And to me, that's something that a lot of people can connect with on a lot of different levels. So I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be a really, really great drop. And I'm hoping that they can really connect with the right audience on it, because Phenomena's done something insane here. It really looks incredible.
Wow.
I think like 7 to 10 purchases between me and Disco are going to happen after we all hang up on the phone. Is this one on their website yet, or not even? This is like pre-breaking, brand new.
So I don't believe it's on their website yet, but I can send you a link really quick to see if I can get it in front of you.
Okay.
It's currently, what I can say is it is also currently on display over at Gallery Met. So if you are, I want to say that's in Germany, but yeah, it's in Berlin. It's on display over at Gallery Met between September 3rd and September 5th. I'm dropping the link to this into our chat, like the guest chat.
Okay.
But that'll take you directly to the promotional flyer that they did for Eternal Tides at Gallery Met.
Perfect. Okay. Copy, paste. Okay. 3 screen. All right, cool. So Vivid Gallery, Vivid Phenomena. Wow, that's beautiful. So Gallery Met, that's September 18th to the 21st. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that is not. That is 9/3 to 9/5. Oh, that's going on right now.
Yep. So 9/3 to 9/5, it'll be on display over at Gallery Met. And then I believe Vivid is set to announce the actual date for the auction probably shortly thereafter. But to me, there's an insane richness just to the test outputs that we've been seeing. And typically speaking, the way that the Chef Duvray format works with buying the algorithm
Yeah.
is they automatically give you access to like a certain number of different outputs from the algorithm itself. So you automatically get the ability to actively live render different outputs from this algorithm, but you are the pure and sole owner of that algorithm that's been inscribed on a Satoshi, which is wild.
So is that like this last one where it's a one of one, or there'll be a bunch where a bunch of collectors can do this and have their own outputs?
So this is just one of one, and the individual who purchases the one of one owns basically the ability to visualize all of these different outputs.
Wow. Could that
So
person
it's
then go and make the outputs and then sell the outputs?
so you've asked me that question before when we talked about
Did I?
the
Damn
aligned collection.
capitalists.
No, because the first collection that used the new format was aligned by Tim Maxwell and Enrico Penza, and it was it was incredible to see what they did with this collection. But you would ask that question because you were trying to understand the format itself, which I respect tremendously, and I also respect the capitalist in you. But I don't believe that the intent is to be able to then sell all of the said outputs or have the right to sell the outputs. But it's not something that I'm totally clear on. You may actually have that right or that ability. I just am not totally sure of it.
So this is also brand new that that everything is kind of still up for grabs. Is this the same mentality as the Hard Far, the Brutal Edge stuff with the swarming, or is this different?
So with swarming, it's different. Swarming is how do I best explain this? Like it's really about opening the door to giving your collectors more variety and more ways to connect with your work. So in Far's case, he basically set this up so that you have some of his old collections like Buzz 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 that have like this massive population, right? Like I think there's like 20,000 of these pieces that exist
Right.
because it was a timed open edition. Then you have Brutal Edge that is a collaboration that he did with Hardo that is 4,000 pieces, I think. And you also have another larger collection from Hardo in Floriforms, which is 10K. So with swarming, the idea is you go to the swarming site and you will bring the pieces that you have, and you can key in which of these pieces you want to redeem for something different. So you can redeem for a much more exclusive collection that either of these artists has released in the past or something that they're going to release in the future at any given moment. It's about redeeming these larger batches of works for stuff that is either more resonant to you or something that's more exclusive, like my favorite example, which is Far's Umwelt series. He has this collection that was like a sub 100K inscription, and people just don't even know about it. It's like it's an AI collection that he's kept to himself, and he's planning on making it available to people that participate in swarming.
Oh, I remember
That's
this. Yeah, you were telling
that's
me about this. Yeah, these are super cool. So you might have to trade some of his other stuff in to get one of these. You might have to trade a bunch of higher inscription, other collection, one from each one or something to get these.
correct. Yeah. So it's the entire advantage to it is like it's about controlling supply and market value for the artist, but it also opens the door to like enhanced collaboration opportunities. So with what Hardo and Farr did, they have this ability to churn out a completely new collection, for example, by putting together a certain number of Brutal Edge pieces and a certain number of Buzz 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 pieces. So like if you brought four of those Buzz 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 and four of the Brutal Edge together, you can redeem it for a piece in that new collection as just one example. But it also introduces things like maintaining market balance, and honestly overcoming a lot of the challenges that stem from having larger bodies of work. But I'm really encouraged by it. I think they've got a lot of potential in front of them.
Well, the cool thing is, like, when you say redeeming, you are burning, right? You're those. I mean, obviously they're always on chain, but they certainly your private key ownership of them goes away. So in a sense, you're burning for, hopefully for you, a more one of one rare thing that you want. Do you know what you get before, or is it almost like a box of chocolates where you never quite know what you're going to get?
So I think that the one thing that you will know is the overall aesthetic of the collection that you're swarming into. And one of the things that Farr made really clear on the space when I spoke with him was that this new mechanism with swarming is not exactly like a burn, but it is a way for you to still find your way into something that's more exclusive. So it will always have an outline of like the number of pieces that you will swarm to obtain a new piece in this collection. And you'll know what that collection is. It'll never be a mystery. So, in the case of what I know they're headed for initially, is this collection called the Alpha Queens or the Queens Collection, which is just going to be a consolidation of the Buzz 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 pieces that will be merged together to form an Alpha Queen. So, that's just one of the examples.
This is so cool. Like, I could literally just be, and Blatoshi isn't usually silent, but I can just be like silent and scroll as the processors, on the old Windows 95 computer, my brain slowly whir and figure this out and learn about it and get smarter about art. Like, I'm definitely making at least two purchases right after we hang up. I suspect Blue is in the same boat. Blue, do you have any other questions for Steven? This has been, as always, like,
Are you talking to
I'm
yourself?
gonna have to take a nap, which I do anyway. But I take my 3 o'clock nap and then I process everything. But this has been incredible.
Yeah, I find it interesting that when we went on earlier today, we are kind of scoffing at the term alpha, and like, oh, everyone's got alpha, and then at the end of this conversation, I have a freaking notepad of notes that I would not want anyone to take a look at, and I'm like, hey, are we live? Oh no, I want to make sure I can post it. So it's just again, one of the things about the space that gets me excited every day to get up and engage is that there's all these people, as we said earlier, who are on the forefront of things that are extremely exciting and vital and new school, next gen and all that. And to just look at it and know that this is still something based on, all the things that when we first started talking, we're exciting about art and why we're, say that that's something that we're passionate about, to see these outputs happening in real time, for you to be able to kind of navigate through it for everyone, like what a service. And I just feel very grateful for the time just even spent on this, on this, conversation. And I just hope to continue it moving forward. And I almost got just kind of rejuvenated in terms of the things that excite me about collecting and exploring. And that's kind of how it all kind of, I'm going to hang up being more jazzed up than I was before I started. And that's all I can ask for. So thank you for your time and wisdom and really for that kind of spark of excitement again.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I was stoked to be able to spend some time with you. Again, I could dive in a whole lot deeper, and I've got one more recommendation for you after the show, Disco, that I think you'll enjoy just based on the aesthetic that you were sharing earlier with us. But if I can make one final plug really quick, if
Yeah.
you are really into this stuff and you really do want to get better about exploring the art that's out there and seeing more of like what an art community can really be,
Mm-hmm.
don't be shy about trying to find the one that makes the most sense for you. There's a lot of really great art communities within Web3 right now that are still kicking, and There are some that are brand new. You know, one of the ones that I'm personally a part of that I've loved being a part of, I've met a lot of phenomenal people in our space through it, has been Roger Dickerman's 24 Hours of Art. That's one really good one. There's 452B from OG Crooked West. He's got a great community over there. A lot of exclusive art drops for them as well. And then the one that I really want to make sure that people are aware of, if you're into art on Bitcoin and exploring what is really coming to the forefront of art on
Yeah.
Bitcoin, there's literally no better community to join than Aeons, which I will disclose. I've officially stepped on as a strategic art advisor for them recently, and I just am really taken with their direction. I think they have the right intention behind them to promote art, to help collectors better understand what it is that actually makes for great art on Bitcoin. But more than that, helping people come together around a genuine passion and a love for art.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Hold on,
And
I'm
you feel,
pulling the aeons up. Go ahead, Disco.
well, I just think that what could be exciting about what you're, alluding to with the community side of it is it doesn't seem, it just seems like it can be, you come together on kind of a mutual appreciation for, a vibe and an aesthetic and a feeling, and it kind of, takes away some of the toxicity that people experience in some of the other sort of communities that we've spent time in, because you have kind of this guiding force or north star of like, dude, we're all into the same sort of vibe, and we want to enjoy it and kind of share how it makes us feel. So I'm on board for sure.
Yeah, and Stephen, just tell us about, because Aeon and Aeons is an art collecting community with art at its core. Could you just tell us a little bit about Aeons and why you're congratulations for this new role, but why you're so excited for it?
So first and foremost, like upfront, if you want to talk about PFPs on Bitcoin, I think we can all probably agree that they're in large part just derivatives of one another. And I have never really gotten off on that. It's just not for me. I want to see art that's original. I want to see, collections that have originality to the form factor. And their lead artist, Basil. And by the way, if you are a collection or if you are a PFP collection and you're not highlighting your artist, you're a fool. Um, PFP collections, especially in this day and age, they need to be able to showcase that artist who actually created the work. They've brought Basil well to the forefront, and they want people to know his work. So I give them a lot of credit for that. It was one of the first reasons why I got really, really, really interested in the collection, was because they prioritized that. But with this style, it is different from everything else that's out there. It's not just, you know, taking the form of a crypto punk that we've seen time and time and time again. It's
Hmm.
not just ripping on Bored Ape Yacht Club. No, this is actually adapting the neo-expressionist style really well, and bringing it into a much more modern aesthetic of its own. So when I talk about neo-expressionism, a lot of Basil's influences come from Basquiat, Warhol, Chris O'Feely, Philip Guston, like the absolute legends of the neo-expressionist movement. And you see a lot of these traits. Yes, some of them are more playful than others, but there's something that I think anybody can like. Like you can go through these traits, you can find things that speak to you, you can find just totally unique aesthetic that is something you want to represent or that you want to hold, but it'll bring you together with the community in a way that I think shows a ton of promise. And what you're showing right now on screen is the one of ones within the collection. And I think that truly, like, if you want to talk about diversity across the collection, there's a lot of unique aesthetic to be had there and a lot of really, really cool outputs. So I'm a huge fan of what they did artistically, but their vision for where they want art on Bitcoin and tokenized art at large to be as a priority in this space and not exclusively be speculative is a sentiment that is not too common. It's something that we need a lot more of, and it's something that I've prioritized in my own journey. So we were aligned from a vision perspective. We were aligned from a mission perspective, and I do want to see them shine because I think that they have the right intent. They have a direction. They know what they want the future of art on Bitcoin to look like, and they want all artists of all aesthetics and all styles to have a place there. And that to me is the most important piece.
Wow.
Yeah, these are beautiful. Give me your favorite. What's your favorite trait on the Aeons?
So if you go into the top layer, it's the one right above unique,
Yep.
and you scroll all the way to the bottom. I may or may not be an absolute bitch for infinite hoodies. I am obsessed with them. I think they're just a really, really cool modern aesthetic that um, it brings in something that people know all too well within Web3 because everybody's obsessed with a black hoodie, and it puts a very interesting spin on it, and it accents the characters themselves in very cool ways. So I've collected a handful of those at this point. I actually minted one, luckily, so I'm a very big fan of it.
Very
Nice.
nice. So 3.3 thousand collection. And the artist, Basil, who you mentioned, he has done a lot of other artwork, or is this his first PFP collection? What else has he done?
So he's been creating for a really long time, but this is his first collection that he's actually debuted. He does have some subsequent works that he's planning on releasing, one of which is actually available right now over on Gamma to those that participated in the Aeons Festival, which is a larger art community initiative that they've been running in the background. And in that first wave, stage one of the Aeons Festival, you basically had to take a set number of actions to engage with the community and be a part of the larger art conversation. What they did from there is they put this piece up as an addition over on Gamma. It was called the Colossus of Chaos, and the entire method and interesting piece behind this is it brings together two separate art forms that Basil is known for. He's known for his photography, and he's also known for the forms that you see from Aeons, which he's incorporated now into some of his own personal photography. So it's a really interesting piece. It was exhibited in Nashville at the Parthenon for Bit Gala, which I was fortunate enough to have a part in. And yeah, I'm just really taken with him. I think that he's got a great artistic vision. He's doing things differently, and frankly, he's committed to debuting it all on Bitcoin. So I think that there's a very bright future ahead for him as an artist, and I can see it happening right now.
Wow.
Well, cool, and congratulations on that new role. It's well deserved, and I gotta say, scrolling through that collection too, I said Disco and I together might buy 7 things. It might be 9 now. So
Mm.
I appreciate you for giving me the laundry list because, like I said, Steven, everything your insight and ability to articulate art and how it's made, and like you said, getting to know the artist, which I think is probably the most underrated thing about the entire crypto space. I've collected stuff from Otto and Lemon Haze and um, gosh, there's so many from the Bitcoin side now, and even on the East side. But I've gotten to know these guys over the year, and the more I get to know them, like Lemonades and I now share musical tastes and stuff. We have a very similar love for the French band called Air, who Disco got me into probably 20 years ago. So it's a small world.
Indeed.
And he knew my favorite album called Moon Safari, and right away I'm like, okay, you're one of my best friends immediately. Disco, obviously, but obviously Lemon Haze too. It's like that bond of like that obscure music. But I'm blown away. This is so cool. And Steven, thank you for coming on the show. As you all know, this is not financial advice. This is not artistic advice. This is not any sort of advice that could get us in trouble for giving you advice or alpha or any of that other BS. We just talk about what we love. We follow what we love. And these are the things we talk about. So, not financial advice and every other disclaimer that I'm probably supposed to put in this very legalese world. So, Steve, stay on for 1 second. We're going to shut down the show, but you could tell this scary thing. And then there's one thing I want to tell you too. So, thank you, everybody. This has been an awesome show. Steven, thanks for coming on and to our news show to talk about NFTs and IPFS and how insecure that is. That's a huge topic right now, and that's one we're going to follow. So take care, everybody. Thank you. Until next time.
Thank you, guys.